This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Celebrations and clashes in Beirut as Lebanese Prime Minister and cabinet resign. Investigations underway after gunmen kill 6 French aid workers in Niger. And Mauritius fights to contain oil spill as fears grow the tanker might split. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. I'm Richard Cyril Untal, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. In business, Sasol, South Africa warns of lower annual earnings as oil price and pandemic hurt demand. And in sports, Kenya's women's rugby team captain Philadelphia Orlando hopes for positive results in Japan. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Thanks for tuning in. Let's bring you up to speed with some of the stories we have on our radar. We begin in Niger, where an investigation is underway after 6 French aid workers, together with their local driver and guide, were killed by unknown assailants over the weekend. French and Nigerian soldiers have been hunting for traces of the attackers who ambushed the group at a giraffes reserve about 40 miles from the capital, Niamey. The hit was carried out by gunmen on motorbikes who targeted the team from French humanitarian group Acted as they drove through the wildlife reserve. There have been warnings against travel to parts of Niger where militant groups, including Boko Haram, operate. However, the area where the attack occurred is generally considered safe by the government. No group has claimed responsibility for the incident.
What we can say is that the victims were between 25 and 50 years old. There were 4 women and 4 men. The zone they were visiting is usually where the entire international community based in Niamey go on weekends. Experts, diplomats, what have you, and which until the present time and until yesterday had not seen any security incidents. This explains why this route and this park are in the yellow zone, and also the reason why this is a terrible paradox that this incident, this tragedy, occurred in one of the country's most secure zones.
Et qui, jusqu'à présent,
pour Acted, oui, tout à fait. Par la brutalité.
Yesterday was unprecedented for Acted because of the brutality, the suddenness, and the fact that we hadn't expected this in that zone.
Il y a des trajets suivis.
And to Lebanon now, where it's been a celebratory mood since Prime Minister Hassan Diab announced his government's resignation Monday. The announcement was met with cars honking in the streets and celebratory fire in parts of the country. The cabinet stepped down following outrage over the deadly Beirut port explosion. Before that, several ministers had resigned. The outgoing government is now due to stay on in a caretaker capacity, and the next elections could still be months away. At least 160 people were killed in last week's explosion, which members of the Lebanese public blame on negligence. They are calling for an independent probe led by foreign experts. The country's top officials are yet to agree. Let's get more from our correspondent Adel El Mahroui joining us live from Beirut. Adel, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. Always a pleasure having you. First things first, the president has asked the prime minister to stay on as caretaker after the resignation. What is the reaction in Beirut to this development?
So basically, the protesters were expecting that this will be the case. They were not celebrating, and they were quite indifferent about the resignation of the prime minister because the parliament remains intact. And according to the Lebanese constitution, it's the parliament that forms the cabinet. And therefore, they believe that whatever cabinet will be formed, it will be following the policies that they've been standing against for months. That's why there were no signs of celebrations, and whether Hassan Diab remains or not, whether he leaves or another prime minister is appointed. To the protesters who join and are still calling for more political movements, they don't see any much difference. They want to see the parliament resign. This is where everything matters. This is where the elections should be taking place. But the parliament, on the other hand, is still doesn't seem to be giving any indication that it will be dissolved or calling for early elections. Only few members of parliament have been resigning. The parliament will be convening on Thursday to discuss the state of emergency and to discuss the incident, the blast, the Beirut port blast that has left about 300,000 Lebanese people displaced.
Very important points that you have made there, Adel. That brings me to my next question. How is the clearance of the blast site coming along, and how are the victims being assisted to pick up their lives?
Well, I mean, when you walk in the streets of Beirut, it's devastating. The radius of the explosion is so big. Whenever you walk, you see places that have been affected. There are buildings that have entirely collapsed, and there are those who are been partly damaged. According to the Lebanese governor, I spoke to him yesterday, he said that at least half of the city's buildings and houses were affected in one way or another. So there is really a lot of rebuilding efforts needed. The search and rescue are still ongoing. Just earlier this morning, the Lebanese military, which is controlling the site of the port and is supervising the rescue and search mission, which at least 20 countries have participated in so far with their own teams. Earlier this morning, they have found 5 additional bodies under the rubble. There's at least 60 to 55 others still missing. That's at least the official numbers that the government is aware of. So we're talking about a huge effort, and despite all what is going on from civil work, from officials, from international support, these efforts that are going around the clock, it seems insignificant to the magnitude of destruction.
All right, Adel Marie, let's leave it there for now. As always, great to have you with us. Excellent reporting. Thanks for bringing all of that there to light. Let's now take a deeper look into the Mauritius oil spill and where things stand as of now.
On July 25th, the Japanese-owned ship MV Wakashio ran aground off the southeastern coast of Mauritius, an island in the Indian Ocean. Reports indicate the Mauritius Coast Guard tried numerous times to contact the vessel about sailing too close to shore. Despite repeated warnings, the captain of the Wakashio continued on his path until the vessel became grounded on a reef near the shoreline. While the cargo ship was empty of cargo, it was carrying 200 tons of diesel and 3,800 tons of bunker fuel. There were also 20 crew members on board. All were safely rescued and are currently in quarantine in Mauritius. For 2 weeks, the Wakashio sat grounded in the coral reefs. It was the persistent battering waves that eventually cracked its hull open, causing it to begin leaking engine fuel on August the 6th. It's estimated that about 2,500 tons of fuel remain in the ship. On August the 7th, the Mauritius Prime Minister declared a state of emergency and appealed for help to the French President Emmanuel Macron, who offered military support dispatched from the nearby French Reunion Island to extract the remaining fuel in the ship. As of Monday, August the 10th, about 1,500 tons of oil have leaked from the Wakashio. This is endangering not only protected habitats, but also the local economy, which depends on fishing and tourism. On the same day, during a news conference in Tokyo, Akihiko Ono, the executive vice president of Mitsui O.S.K. Lines, which owns the Wakashio, apologized for the spill and, quote, "the great trouble we have caused." The Japanese Foreign Ministry also pledged to dispatch a 6-person emergency response team to Mauritius to assist with cleanup efforts. In the meantime, Mauritian environmentalists, coastal residents and volunteers have worked together to assemble and deploy homemade floating booms made mostly of sugarcane bagasse and empty plastic bottles sewn together with homemade netting in the hope of preventing the oil from spreading further. In addition, fuel is also being pumped into containers above the deck. These are being transported by government and private sector helicopters to shore. As of August the 11th, it seems industrial booms have finally arrived from France and are being dispatched. These booms are specifically engineered to contain oil spills and are fitted with stainless steel fittings and hot galvanized ballast and tension chains secured with reinforced chains attachment points. On average, 200 meters can be deployed in under 15 minutes using high-capacity air blowers. Many currently believe that slow government response and rough seas have turned a relatively minor oil spill into a potential ecological and economic disaster. The ship has now started breaking up, meaning the immediate catastrophe could be 2,500 tons of fuel dumped into the coast at any time. Amidst the various cleanup and containment efforts, it seems the oil had spread as far up the island's eastern coast, a popular resort island. There, one can now find oil-covered mangrove swamps that serve as critical habitat for plants, insects, and birds endemic to Mauritius. Jane Keo, CGTN.
Let's now turn our attention to South Sudan, where at least 70 people are feared to have been killed in clashes between civilians and government forces. The clashes took place during a disarmament exercise in Tinga East in Warab State in the north of the country. Patrick Oyet brings us the details.
South Sudan's government says it is disarming civilians across the country to avoid intercommunal clashes, and what's been going on in Warab State is part of that process. Warab State is prone to intercommunal clashes that have killed hundreds of civilians, but this is the first time that the civilians have clashed with government troops. The local authority says more than 70 people are now dead. The government says the clashes are due to a misunderstanding.
It has been contained, this situation. It has not been exceeding up to now. It has been contained. These are our people. And we don't want actually to use the powers that government has, and are our people. And these are the people that we are here. So you don't actually fight with your own citizens using the facilities that you have against your own people. It is not. It cannot happen. But the clashes that happen and misunderstanding that happen between our soldiers and those citizens in that particular area, it was not something that organized so that we can be able to confront ourselves, because we are here to protect them and we are not here to kill them.
South Sudan's government says it is working to ensure that such clashes never happen again.
With this particular case that has been happening in Warab, in the area of Tinga East, between our soldiers and our population in that particular area, there will be a process that will be actually set up in the headquarters here to investigate the root cause of the problems.
The government says some civilians have become displaced from the area, houses have been burnt, and a number of women and children are seeking safety in the nearby area. The disarmament team comprises troops from the police, the National Security, and South Sudan's People's Defense Forces. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
You're watching Africa Live on CGT, and we've got a lot more news coming your way. Stay tuned.
First trip to Africa, my impressions are, wow, it's a land full of hope. In Africa, there are so many young people who could be entrepreneurs. They believe what they're doing and they want to make this thing big. So what if we have Africa Bill Gates, Africa Jack Ma? I realized that I have to do something. The African Entrepreneur Prize is giving the inspirations to all the entrepreneurs in Africa. I think we should make them heroes. If the heroes succeed, a lot of people want to be heroes. They can start their dream and change the continent.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Over in Kenya, a wildfire raging through Tsavo West National Park since Saturday has been brought under control, and that's according to the Kenya Wildlife Service. The KWS said the military and local volunteers helped contain the blaze alongside KWS officers. Local media reports that fires also broke out at the Ngeno, and Lumo conservations. Tsavo is one of the biggest national parks in Kenya. The fire comes as the government tries to revive the country's tourism industry. that has been crippled by the coronavirus pandemic. And South Africa's ban on alcohol continues to have devastating impact on the entire industry. Over 118,000 jobs have been lost since the first ban was implemented in March. SAB and Heineken SA have since cut back on investments amounting to, listen to this, more than $339 million US, and the rest of the liquor value chain is also being affected. Sumitra Naidu takes a look at how recyclers are surviving during this time.
The South African government is losing billions in tax revenue as a ban on alcohol remains in place. But the alcohol industry is losing more. The entire value chain is being impacted. One of the hardest hit parts of the supply chain is glass recycling.
Alcoholic beverages comprise all 85% of all glass sales, which is used to package alcohol. This has had a devastating impact not only on the glass manufacturers, everyone across the value chain. The impact of this on the first ban, glass collectors, of which there's approximately 50,000, could not collect their glass because there was no one to buy their glass, so it had a devastating impact on them.
After a brief lifting, President Cyril Ramaphosa reinstated the ban to help restore capacity in hospitals that were being inundated with alcohol-related incidents. Waste pickers and glass recyclers are struggling to survive.
Recycling all the time, just recycle, keep on recycling because we don't have works.
And it helps us a lot because we can buy food with it and it's a daily income. Every day we must buy food for the children.
Per day we make about sometimes 80, for the lowest we make 80 rand, sometimes for the highest we make about 250.
It makes us suffering and make us worse suffering because sometimes we don't get nothing, we must go sleep hungry. We can't make a plan at home.
South Africa has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world at 30%. COVID-19 and the subsequent lockdown will push this higher in coming months. Another 84,000 jobs are on the line in the alcohol industry.
As an industry, we did assist the glass suppliers who supply to the two glass manufacturers with cash incentives. We supported the glass suppliers who supply to Isanti and to Consol in excess of 1.8 million rands. Currently, with the second ban, we're very tight in terms of financial resources. We're looking at where we can help. But from a government perspective, there has been absolutely no assistance whatsoever.
Consol Glass has reportedly halted a $113 million investment due to the alcohol ban. The investment was anticipated to create 120 direct jobs and over 2,600 along the chain. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Schools in the Democratic Republic of Congo have reopened 2 weeks after the government lifted the COVID-19 restrictions. Hand washing, social distancing, and the wearing of masks are among the health measures to keep students safe. Chris Ochamringa has that report from Kinshasa.
It's the first day of school in Kinshasa after the government eased COVID-19 restrictions. Only students who are taking their final exams have been allowed to attend classes. They are back after nearly 5 months of staying at home.
Nous avons eu l'interruption de plus ou moins 4 mois.
We had an interruption of 4 months and 3 weeks in our school activities because of the pandemic. During that period, we provided online classes so that our students continue learning. Now we have resumed our classes for candidates who will be sitting exams this year.
Authorities in Manyanga Primary School have reduced the number of students in class to limit the spread of the coronavirus. The students are thrilled to be back despite the new changes.
I'm happy to be back in school because studying with my friends is much better than studying online. Our teacher has explained some new lessons that would have been difficult to grasp on my own.
It's good that we've been allowed to continue our studies. We missed a lot during the lockdown. We now have to double our efforts to catch up before the year ends. I believe we will do well in the exams despite the interruption.
The DRC capital, Kinshasa, is the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government has issued strict orders to schools to observe the new health regulations. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, this area would be filled with pupils interacting with their friends during break time. But it's now deserted because the new measures prohibit large crowds to protect the pupils from getting infected. Earlier this year, the government introduced free primary education to expand access to education. But the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted its programs and kept many children out of class. Some of them are now finally returning to school. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Egyptians have been heading to the polls to cast their vote for the country's inaugural Senate elections. The exercise has seen schools transformed into polling stations. In July, Election Commissioner Lasheen Ibrahim announced that all polling stations will observe health guidelines. Voters and polling staff are required to wear masks and adhere to social distancing guidelines. The elections follow amendments made to Egypt's constitution in 2019, which paved way for the creation of the Council of Senators. The council is a 300-member secondary chamber consisting of 2/3 elected officials and the rest appointed by the president. The outcome of the election is expected to be announced next week. Voters have expressed mixed feelings about the polls.
The Shura Council during the days of Hosni Mubarak was okay. It was okay, and it had positive aspects, of course. I hope that the new one, that is the Senate, is like it. I hope we get some good candidates and that something good comes out of this to benefit everyone.
There's no use to go out and vote. What should I vote and say? If I choose any of the candidates, what use will she bring to me? What have the members of parliament done for us?
The director for the Center for China Studies in Nigeria has denounced the recent move by the United States to sanction some Hong Kong officials, including Chief Executive Carrie Lam. Charles Ununaiju says the decision is provocative and displays what he terms as a Cold War mentality.
Recent sanction imposed by the U.S. government against China and some elements of the local administration in Hong Kong is symbolically provocative, lacking in any substance or any meaningful impact on China or its within its territory. It is designed essentially to provoke, and this seems to have exposed the Cold War mentality still within some elements of U.S. ruling circle who believe that China could be contained, China's development could be rolled back. This obviously is against historical trends. It does nothing to give room for the current correct cooperation arrangement between China and the United States.
Time now for a short break. We've got your business news coming up. Here's a look at the headlines. Well, coming up in business, Sasol South Africa warns of lower annual earnings as oil price and pandemic hurt demand. And the U.S. threatens to delist Chinese firms that don't comply with its accounting standards by 2021.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. South Africa's Sasol has warned it will report an annual loss after a drop in oil and chemical prices. The world's top producer of motor fuel and from coal says its headline loss per share is expected to be between 0.49 and 0.84 in the year to June the 30th as a result of the pandemic, compared with headline earnings of $1.74 per share during the same period a year ago. Lower global chemical and refining margins have dented Sasol's earnings. Another factor has been an 18% decrease in the rand per barrel price of Brent crude oil. The adjusted earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization is also expected to fall by as much as 37%. That's expected to be between $1.6 billion to $2.2 billion. Moving on, the coronavirus pandemic has plunged millions of people into poverty, and a majority of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. The World Bank says up to 100 million people could soon fall into extreme poverty. Terry Wangari has the details.
Amsale Haile-Mariam had an inside view of a richer lifestyle in the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa. She used to work as a housekeeper, but the coronavirus has cost the single mother even that meager living, putting that world even further out of reach.
Since the beginning of the coronavirus, there is no job. We are staying at home and have stopped moving out so that we don't get infected. We are living in a state where we are above the dead and below the living. This is not life.
Until the outbreak, Haile-Mariam's daughter, Bethlehem Jafar, was studying for a career in public health. She's been forced to put that aside for now. Haile-Mariam says her hopes and dreams are tied up in her daughter, and that's why she doesn't give up.
So that she doesn't follow in my footsteps and go through what I went through. I single-handedly worked hard to see her go to school and succeed.
And because of the mayhem caused by the pandemic, many more around the world may soon be joining her. The World Bank says up to 100 million people could soon fall into extreme poverty. This is defined by living on just $1.90 a day.
Based on these projections of a fairly sizable economic contraction because of the global pandemic, we indeed expect, or these models expect, for poverty to rise for the first time since the Asian economic crisis in 1998.
A lot of the gains of the last 25 years are going to be wiped out.
More than 736 million people are already in extreme poverty. Half of them are in just 5 countries: Bangladesh, Congo, India, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. But the last quarter century has seen a transformation in the East African nation that is one of the world's economic success stories. Smith says Ethiopia, like many countries in sub-Saharan Africa, is heavily dependent on foreign investment.
They don't have the money they need to both respond to the pandemic, but also stop the bleeding from this sudden freeze in incoming capital and revenue. Bilateral debt service has been suspended through the end of this year, but it's not nearly enough. We need to go through 2021. We need the multilateral organizations and the private creditors to come on board.
How swiftly things rebound depends on how quickly an effective vaccine is found and how equitably it is distributed.
If we see a kind of a normalization of the global pandemic by the end of the year, in which the pandemic is under control, cases are low, there's progress towards a vaccine, I think Ethiopia can rebound quickly.
But until then, things will continue to deteriorate for people like Haile-Mariam. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
In the U.S., lawmakers are continuing to battle over an economic relief plan. That comes as President Donald Trump says on social media that his political opponents want to meet to discuss a new stimulus plan. Unemployment benefits for tens of millions of Americans dropped by $600 per week at the end of July. Trump has signed an order in an attempt to restore part of that money, but as our Owen Fairclough reports, he may have created a new set of problems.
Estasha Goodwin managed to adapt her nail salon business after it was shut down when COVID-19 hit San Francisco in March.
I started recently offering press-on nails. They're a full coverage nail tip that goes over the nails that I can design in any art, customize for my clients, and send them with a kit and everything they need to put it on themselves.
But it hasn't been enough. Even when the federal government topped up unemployment benefits with $600 a week, as part of a $2.2 trillion stimulus package.
Honestly, the stimulus goes 100% to my rent and maybe about a week of food. Unfortunately, it doesn't cover my rent here at my salon space. It doesn't cover my car note. It doesn't cover insurance. It doesn't cover a lot of things.
And those extra benefits expired at the end of July.
We do have divisions about what to do.
Negotiations over how much to spend on another rescue package have collapsed, with Democrats demanding more than $3 trillion, Republicans around $1 trillion.
If Democrats are focused on meeting the immediate needs of tens of millions of people terrified about how to pay for their next meal or facing eviction, Conservative Republicans are focused on the economic impact of all this spending and specifically an ever-ballooning budget deficit. It's nearly $3 trillion and counting, and Republicans think a deficit this steep will hamper any economic recovery as well as future growth. They also want to focus on helping businesses and limit financial support for individual states. President Trump has waded into the deadlock, signing a handful of orders to increase unemployment benefits by $400 a week, as well as preventing evictions and suspending payroll taxes.
Will help, but we're not going to do numbers. They talked about a number of $1 trillion. We can't do that.
Yet Democrats claim Trump's actions fall far short of the kind of help Americans need and argue that ending payroll taxes drains money from retirement and medical benefits. Trump denies this, but his orders may be open to legal challenge over the limits of his authority.
They're absurdly unconstitutional.
Arguments that perhaps matter less to people like Estasha, as she wonders how to keep her business and household afloat amid a resurgent pandemic.
Until we get it together, then I really do have to make some really hard decisions.
Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Still in the U.S., Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin says companies from China and other countries that fail to comply with U.S. accounting standards will be delisted from American stock exchanges by the end of 2021. Mnuchin and other officials recommended the move to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission last week. They say the aim is to ensure Chinese firms are held to the same standards as U.S. companies. Mnuchin told a White House briefing the SEC was expected to adopt the recommendations. Now to Washington's clampdown on TikTok. Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin has said the Chinese-owned short video app can't continue in its present form by, quote, collecting data on Americans on a large scale, close quote. Mnuchin told CNBC that the Treasury has the tools it needs to remedy the situation. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has urged the U.S. to stop restricting TikTok. The ministry says that the American actions violate World Trade Organization rules by abusing state power and the concept of national security. Meanwhile, National Public Radio is reporting that TikTok plans to file a suit as early as Tuesday over President Donald Trump's executive order banning the app in the U.S. That comes as Fox Business reports that Blackstone is in discussions about potentially buying TikTok's American operations. The move comes one day after reports of Twitter approaching TikTok's Chinese owner, ByteDance, to express interest in the app's U.S. business. All right, now to our special series, China Africa Idea Lab. We meet a young Chinese man who's working to keep children in school in Kenya. He was inspired after visiting an informal settlement in the country. Wilkester Nyabo reports.
Before the pandemic, these were the lively scenes in Mathare, an informal settlement in Nairobi. With the help of the Dream Building Service Association, a non-governmental organization, a section of children were able to get an education and pursue their dreams. But the pandemic has brought new challenges, and once again, these children's future seems uncertain. Chinese student Liu Yimenghan helped to establish the Dream Building Service Association, or DBSA. Yimenghan moved to Kenya with his mother 13 years ago, and as he became acquainted with his new home, he witnessed the challenges low-income households faced.
I got a chance to go to the second largest slum in Kenya called Mathare, and I felt that the situation there was really bad. Roughly 3 kilometers square of area consists of about 500,000 people, and there is no water drainage, there is waterborne diseases, and there is all different difficulties, including the food security.
So he and his friends sought donations from China. They used the funds to build classrooms, offer scholarships, start an annual talent show, and establish a yearly football tournament. And when he realized that many students were dropping out of school, the organization also started offering free lunch at selected schools as an incentive. Though schools are now closed, the feeding program continues.
What we decided is to get the food packages and deliver to the students' family. The reason being that a lot of families has lost their job during the pandemic, and they don't have a source of funds.
The organization has expanded its reach to 6 African countries: Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Malawi, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. However, when the pandemic began, it found itself on the receiving end too. The Kenyan schools that previously benefited raised $100 in support of China.
I got several calls from the head teachers who wanted to support us by getting some fundraising for us to get the masks and some protective gadgets. The strong bonding and the communication made me feel like honestly, I cried on that day because I really felt so warm in the heart.
Through his charitable work, Liu hopes to foster better communication and understanding of the Chinese in Kenya.
African culture is very similar to the Chinese culture, and we share a lot of common things. For example, we do care for others and we do respect our elders. If we are more open-minded and we're more cultural diversified, then we're able to reduce that barrier by improving our language and by improving our minds.
The aim of his organization is to play a role in uplifting the lives of the less fortunate members of Kenyan society, one project at a time. The work that these volunteers have started is even more crucial now in the middle of a pandemic, and though travel may be limited, beneficiaries can acknowledge that the bonds they're forging now transcend borders. Wilkis Anyabwa, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
CGTN Think Tank will host a China-Africa forum with the theme Discover a Different Africa. We will also bring you coverage of the finals of the Public Benefit International Challenge for Youth, a competition where young people collaborate on solutions to Africa's most serious problems. Catch the live stream on Saturday from 600 GMT on all our new media platforms.
My family has been doing this artwork for the past 600 years.
My dream is to be the leading player in Africa in spice sector.
Nobody in the region consumes it. Even me cannot afford the vanilla cooking.
What we've created here is the elegance, the color, the celebration of life.
Tinga Tinga paintings are a unique and visually stunning painting style that was developed in the second half of the 20th century in Tanzania, East Africa. Now, Tinga Tinga is one of the most widely represented forms of tourist-oriented paintings in Tanzania, Kenya, and other neighboring countries. Today, let's walk to Tinga Tinga village in Dar es Salaam and meet Abdul Mkura, one of the best painters within the Tinga Tinga team.
Jina langu Abdu Amonde Mkura. Nimekuja hapa mwaka 1974 na nilipokuja hapa nilifikia kwa kaka yangu ni Omari Amonde. Kaka yangu nilimkuta anachora picha za Tinga Tinga. Lakini sikufahamu Tinga Tinga ni nini, lakini alinielimisha tu vizuri tu. Tinga Tinga maana yake kwamba ni mtu mmoja aliyeanzisha, anaitwa Edward Saidi Tinga Tinga. Yeye ameanza kazi ya kuchora 1968. Ilipofika 72 akafariki. Sisi hapa ni ushirika Tinga Tinga Society Cooperative. Tumeanzisha na 90 mpaka leo tunakubalika na serikali. Na katika memba wa Tinga Tinga tuko 52. Tinga Tinga ilikuja kwamba ni kitu cha kufikiri kichwani. Zamani ilikuwa tunakata sindibodi. Kwa hiyo tunakata zile kwa kutegemea size ambayo inatakikana kubebeka. Baadaye tena mfumo wa kuchukua wateja wetu wanaziona mzito, ndio tukabadilisha mfumo wa plough ili kwa vile mzito kwa kubeba, ndio tukachukua sasa kuwa tunawamba kwenye frame nguo ambaye material yetu sasa tumebadilisha, ndio haya mnayoyaona madukani sasa hivi. Usanii wa zamani unatofautiana na sasa hivi. Zamani Tinga Tinga hamna kusketch. Tinga Tinga inakuja kwamba unachukua, unatayarisha rangi, wewe na brushi na mimi unaanza kuchora. Lakini unaanza kuchora sio kwa kutazama kwamba kukopi mahali. Kwa mfano kama mimi nimeishi kijijini. Wanyama wale tulikuwa wengine tunakutana nao, huyu swala, huyu pundamilia, huyu faru, utachora kama vile ulivyomwona. Hatuwezi kufananisha na kitu, ila tunachukua mawazo ya kichwani. Kwa hiyo mfumo huu umebadilika mara 2 au mara 3, kwa sababu mpaka sasa hivi kwenye tray tunaweza kuchora, kwenye sinia ambaye hii aluminium tunaweza kuchora, kwenye t-shirt tunaweza kuchora. Kwa hiyo ili mabadiliko haya yamekwenda msisimuko wa kazi ambaye tunazozibuni sisi wenyewe. Mimi ninapenda kuchora michoro mingi sana. Lakini michoro niliyokupendelea sana na hasa kuwa na moyo wangu kupenda sana, mchoro wa tembo. Tembo nimechora miaka 20 zilizopita. Nilikuwa na mawazo ya kufikiria hali ya tembo alivyo. Kwanza tembo ni mkubwa kuliko wanyama wote. Alafu tembo ana nguvu kuliko wanyama wote. Niliwaza kwamba nikiweka tembo niweke mpako mweusi. Lakini kwa nini ninaweka mpako mweusi? Huu mpako mweusi sawa na giza, wakati hamna mbalamwezi, hamna nyota kali, giza nene. Sasa na huyu hii nyeusi na tembo, yeye ni anatembea usiku. Kwa hiyo sasa nilifananisha kwamba wale wakubwa hawaoni usiku, hawaoni mchana. Sasa sawa na inti anaikanyaga tu, bwana wewe twende. Hizi kazi sisi tunabadilisha kila awamu. Sasa vijana wa sasa hivi kwanza wameenda shule, wanataka kwenda na maisha ya sasa hivi digital. Sasa lazima wachanganye zamani mpaka sasa hivi, na ndio maana tunaona picha zimebadilika. Tinga Tinga imesifika kwa maadili ya uchoraji wenyewe. Umekuwa kama katuni na elimisha kama shule. Wengi wametengeneza vitabu, wengi wamefundishia watoto. Kwa hiyo ni moja la somo Tinga Tinga, inaelimisha. Mpango wangu wa kwenda mbele kwamba picha mimi huwa natumia baada ya miaka 3, ninafikiri kuchora kitu kingine kipya. Na muundo niliyechora hivi sasa hivi, ninatarajia kuchora picha ingine mpya. Jina la hiyo picha inaitwa zamani mpaka siku hizi. Na matarajio yangu hiyo picha itakuwa zaidi ya picha zingine zozote zile nilizoanza kuzichora kwa wakati.
China's top legislator has decided to extend operation for the 6th Legislative Council of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region by 1 year. in late July. Chief Executive of the HKSAR, Carrie Lam, submitted a report to the Central People's Government proposing the delay of the 7th term Legislative Council election by a year due to a surge in the coronavirus cases in the city. The election was originally scheduled for September the 6th, 2020. Considering Lam's proposal lawful, reasonable, and consistent with the public interest, the State Council has submitted a proposal to the 13th NPC Standing Committee to extend the current term of members of Hong Kong's LegCo. The State Council believes that it is necessary for the NPC Standing Committee to make timely decisions to handle the vacancy of the region's legislative body arising from the postponement of the election to ensure the normal functioning of the HKSAR government and society and maintain the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong. Time now for a short break. We've got your sports news coming up. Let's take a peek at the headline. Kenya women's rugby team captain Philadelphia Orlando hopes for positive results in Japan.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome back to Sport on Africa Live. Let's talk a bit of rugby. Philadelphia Orlando was part of the Kenya Rugby Sevens women's squad that made history at Rio 2016. The squad was only the second female team to compete for the nation at an Olympic Games. But the postponement of the Tokyo 2020 applied the brakes on Orlando's ambition to fire the Kenya Lionesses to a better performance than Rio 2016. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar brings us her story.
The COVID-19 containment measures in Kenya has seriously affected professional athletes in the country. For Philadelphia Orlando, the Kenya women rugby team captain, the country's continued lockdown on sporting facilities and events has forced her to adopt a new routine.
When it started, like the lockdown, we were staying indoors. Like, we were scared of what if I go out there and get this virus and get them to my siblings, what will happen? So I stayed a bit locked myself in the house. That's where I identified the rooftop. And I had to be creative with myself also, like I cannot just sit in the house, do nothing. I need to get something going. I need to keep fit also. And I also go to look for some people I can train during this time because it's not easy. I need to hustle at the end of the day because now my income is not coming, you see. And also the national team, you only get paid